Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Onyx. The Onyx Hunt App is a mobile GPS app for your phone, for your desktop, for your tablet, for hunters by hunters. There's more information than you ever thought possible, from private land boundaries all the way to aerial imagery with 24K topo, offline maps, so you can hunt the backcountry without worrying where you are with saved maps for offline use, custom waypoints, whether you're finding your way back to that wallow, rub, or lookout. By dropping custom waypoints, you can have a reminder of what you found and where you found it. And then you can share those waypoints with your friends and families who hunt with you to know exactly where your position's at. And if you need to be able to find your way back to your vehicle, or if you're shed hunting and want to just keep an idea of your track, use the tracking feature to track the distance of traveled time and time elapsed while leaving a clear path to follow back to camp. And those are just a few of many features that are within the Onyx Hunt app. I would highly recommend, if you haven't already, head over to onyxmaps.com, check out the Hunt app, and if you use the coupon code EMW, you will save yourself 20% off of the app. So Tethered evolved from a burning desire to provide quality gear and resources to the saddle hunting community. The saddle hunting community is a very niche component of the greater hunting industry as a whole, but they noticed that there was a lack of availability and innovation in saddle-specific gear. So they solved this problem with designing, engineering, and producing the most mobile, stealthy, and safest elevated hunting gear on the planet. So if you're interested in checking out the latest, least bulky, most versatile, and safest hunting system in the world, go over to tetherednation.com. Check out the different platforms that they have there, the saddles, all the components, and even more importantly, use the resources that they have to learn about saddle hunting. Learn about it before you make a purchase, and I can promise you that it was something that opened my eyes to a whole nother way of hunting. So check that out at tetherednation.com. And the University of Elk Hunting. So Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 have put together the most fully comprehensive elk hunting learning course available. 17 modules that go through every aspect you can think of, from the planning phases all the way through getting prepared, from fitness to shooting to scouting to what you're doing during the hunt, learning elk behavior, and every little thing in between. This is an extremely helpful course where it takes all that information that you could get from spending hundreds of hours searching the internet and puts it all in one place for you to learn, and knowing that that information is correct rather than what you might get from a forum. So head over to elk101.com, click on the University of Elk Hunting, and use the coupon code EastMeetsWest. That'll save yourself 20% off of the online course. And also, I just wanted to throw out, in addition to that, today, with the guest who's on today's podcast, is Heather Kelly from Heather's Choice. So Heather's Choice has been a company, as you'll hear, that I've been supporting from its very beginning as it launched the Kickstarter. I found out about them and donated to that Kickstarter. They have healthy, delicious, dehydrated food for adventures. They're gluten-free backpacking meals and snacks that are perfect companion for any trip. There's, anything from the breakfast to the dinner entrees to the packaroons, which are everyone's favorites. You gotta check those out. And if you do use the coupon code EastMeetsWest, you'll get free shipping on any orders, which, coming from Alaska, that can save you some money. So check that out at heatherschoice.com, and you'll learn a lot more about it here in this episode. So it is Tuesday, and which means that yesterday was Mountain Buck Monday. So I'm going to go over the Mountain Buck Monday story of the week, and this one comes from Jacob McMurray. And Jacob said, me and my best friend decided one weekend on a wild hare we were going to go to Ohio and hunt for 5 days. When I thought of Ohio, I thought of broken farmland, but the state forest that I was hunting was anything but that. It was just like hunting back home for me, minus all the briars. but I blazed the trail through a 3-year-old cutover to the top of the Finger Ridge and sat on the southeast side where it met the hardwoods. On the second morning of the hunt, I had this buck come in to 20 yards and I double lunged him. Being about 2 miles in on public land made for one heck of a drag, but it was all worth it. And if you have social media, want to head over to the East Meets West Hunt Instagram and East Meets West Outdoors Facebook page. Check it out. You can see the pictures of Jacob's buck, a freaking dandy of a deer that came out of the Ohio mountain country. And just, like I said, beautiful deer and a great story. A lot of things you can learn from that. Talking about hunting the edges, on the southeast side there. Nathan Killen brings that up a lot. Very, very good things learned from this story. And I want to hear your story. Please send it in. Send in your mountain buck stories. Even send in if you had a successful, Western hunt for the first time, or not even the first time. If you're from the East and you've done it a bunch of years, I want to hear the story. I want to share these stories. So please send them over to me either through Instagram, which is probably the easiest, or through email at beau@eastmeetswesthunt.com. So please send those over. I look forward to checking those out. And also, I just wanted to give an update here. So, just this past weekend was the rattlesnake, or I guess venomous snake opener in Pennsylvania, which is crazy to most people because no one knows that. Well, not no one, but most people don't know that there's an actual season for it in Pennsylvania. There's some states that are just illegal to kill rattlesnakes, and others that people just kill them, at random. But in Pennsylvania, you're allowed, you can get an over-the-counter tag now, which used to be a permit. Walk anywhere, you can buy a fishing license as it's managed by the Fish and Boat Commission and buy a tag. So these tags are good for one rattlesnake. It has to be a male, and over 42 inches in length. So it's very difficult to find, a snake of that size and everything, and make sure that you're handling them correctly and really being able to identify them correctly in a safe manner. It's not easy, but anyways, I went out with a good friend of mine, Alex Geithner, his buddy Shane, as well as John Adams, who he filmed the whole hunt, which will be coming out on his YouTube here shortly. I'll share a clip, but John had filmed for Jim Shockey before, Whitetail Adrenaline, Eastman's, worked for them full-time for 3 years, amongst a lot of other things. John's super talented and just wanted to come try out rattlesnake hunting, so he brought his camera along and documented it, so I'm excited to see how that turns out. But I ended up filling my tag within a few hours the first morning, and on a big 50-inch black phase male. So that's my second biggest snake, and so now I got a black phase and a yellow phase, and came home, skinned it out, got the meat, got that in the freezer right now. I'm gonna think about how I'm gonna cook this up. I've grilled it in the past, but might do it a little bit different. I'm not sure. Need to flesh out the skin and get some glycerin on that and hang it up to dry. But other than that, it was a pretty fun day to get out and do some hunting again. It's amazing. We saw 10 rattlesnakes in like 2 hours. So it's crazy that the population's doing that well in parts of Pennsylvania. So anyways, enough rambling on here. Let's jump into this podcast here with Heather Kelly from Heather's Choice. And Heather has been a longtime friend of mine, as I said, and she's very intelligent when it comes to nutrition, and I've really looked up to her from learning from a business side of things. There's a bunch of stuff you can pull away from this episode, so I hope you enjoy. All right, we're live. I am talking through the Skype phone call, which happens to be pretty often nowadays. I don't get to meet with people in person, but this one I'm talking to a friend of mine all the way up in Alaska, Heather Kelly. What's up, Heather?
Hey, how are ya? I'm excited for you to come up here this summer again.
I know. I am so pumped. What did I tell you when? So, just a quick background here. Heather was on episode 3 of the podcast, one of the first ones I had recorded. So if you haven't listened to that one, definitely go back and check it out. But I recorded that with her in person up in Alaska, in your backyard. That was a trip that just changed a lot for me. Is the reason why I'm coming back, this August. I told you, I said within the next couple of years, I'm coming to hunt Alaska.
Yep, and now you're making the trip. Our last time we were recording, remember I think we were in your tent, and the dog Cole kept busting through the mesh to steal all of your things. It was such a shit show. It was so funny.
Yeah, Cole came through and took my pillow and some of my food, and was dragging it out of the tent. And we were in the Seek Outside Cimarron teepee, and I had that bug nest, and we were inside that because the bugs were so bad. And I'm just looking out at the dog, just taking all of my shit and dragging it through the yard. It was hilarious.
You will be very happy to hear that Cole is still a big part of our life, and he's our dog Django's best buddy, and he is still a terror. So nothing has changed in Cole's world.
That's so funny. That trip was awesome. Like I said, it really changed my whole view of wanting to hunt Alaska, and just finally this year it's made it happen. When I say finally, it's only been 2 years later, but I'm super pumped to get up there.
Yeah. What's the whole story with this trip that you're going to do? Because obviously, hopefully we get to see you for a hot second while you're headed out to go hunting, but what all are you going to do while you're up here?
So it's a pretty streamlined trip where we're flying into Anchorage, and then early in the next morning, heading up to Kotzebue, Alaska, and then flying in a float plane from there into basically just north of the Arctic Circle and hunting some caribou. So it's just me and a friend of mine, Michael Palladino, are getting dropped off, and then Justin Mueller, who filmed my elk hunt. I haven't even talked about that on the podcast yet, but I just signed him on to come do a film for it and take some photos. And I just said I needed to have this trip documented better than I could by myself. And Justin's just a standout guy. So I'm pumped to do that. They're going to drop us off, just an unguided caribou hunt for 7 days.
Yay. That's so exciting. So you're going to get a kick out of this. My cousin Megan works with a flight service out of Kotzebue. So don't be surprised if some gorgeous blonde gal is helping you shuttle your gear to the bush plane, and she's probably my cousin.
That's so funny.
That's how Alaska's that small. It's so freaking silly.
Yeah, well, she's on the complete opposite side of the state, and you're like, oh, if you run into this gorgeous blonde girl, then I know her. I'm related to her.
Totally. We're related.
Alaska's one big small town.
Yeah, oh gosh, I love it up here, especially this time of year. The winters are so hard, and then the summers make it so worthwhile, because last night we were up hanging out with our friends till 2 a.m, and it's oh, I think it's getting light out. We should probably go to bed. Yep, we love it here.
Yeah, that's awesome. So Heather, you've grown up your whole life in Alaska and everything, but you had recently just got back from, well, not recently, I guess now, but it seems like recently, rafting trip in the Grand Canyon. I want to hear about it because I have not talked to you since you've been on that trip.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So when I was 22, I think, was my first month-long Grand Canyon rafting trip. And that was kind of my first major backcountry experience. Sure, I'd been camping a couple times and whatever, but when I got the invite to go on this 20 some odd day rafting trip with way bigger whitewater than I'd ever run before in the desert, a place I'd never been, it was holy smokes, what am I getting myself into? And since then, this was actually my 5th month-long Grand Canyon trip I've done in the last 10 years. And the Grand Canyon honestly feels like home away from home for me. It's probably the way you feel about like the Pennsylvania woods that you get to play in, where you've spent so much time there. I bet it feels safe and it almost feels like going home. That's kind of my experience of the Grand Canyon. It feels like going home, which is such a crazy concept, because you're going to like this big ditch, like in the middle of winter.
No, I can relate to that. Actually, where I was elk hunting in Colorado for the first 3 years of elk hunting, like that spot when I drive up to that trailhead, it just felt like the first time I was there, I was so afraid of just not knowing the unexpected. And by the time I was there, my third year after spending 20 some days total in that area, it was just like it felt right.
Yep. Yeah. So, yeah, I was really fortunate to get to go back. Our friends have sort of a system where we apply for permits every winter, and we have a group of people that we just kind of stack dates. So we all kind of agree on 5 dates that we want to apply for. And so then if anybody in our group gets a permit, we all get to go on the trip. And so there's people who have applied to go on the Grand Canyon and have waited 10, 15, 20 years and have never gotten a permit. But those are typically people who are applying for the summer months, which those trips are way busier. It's also the commercial season. It's way freaking hotter, obviously. But for us, we just love these January, February trips because it's about anywhere from 30 to 70 degrees at the bottom of the canyon, depending on where you are and depending on the weather. But usually there's a high pressure system, and like over the 25 days, I think we had 1 day of rain, and the rest of it was sunshine. So it's a pretty nice way to spend February, if you ask me.
Yeah, I'd say. Oh, that's awesome. And where you live in Alaska, does the weather get really bad there in the wintertime?
Yeah. When I left here, it was 20 below at our house, like snowing like crazy and 20 below. And I was like, okay, here, I'm going to throw all my river gear into the back of the car and like drive to the airport and like see you later. It is so freaking cold and dark here in the wintertime. You got to get out of Anchorage or Fairbanks or wherever you live in Alaska. It's just a good idea to take a break and go somewhere else for a bit.
Oh, that's funny. But then, so once you got down there and took off, you said it was a 30-day trip? Yeah.
So this one, I've done 30-day trips. This one was actually just 25, but we have a group of, I know, we're so spoiled. We have a group of 15 people, and we took 5 18-foot rafts. And so we have the whole trip outfitted by Pro River Outfitters, which I can't recommend enough. And so basically you say, you can take a maximum of 16 people and you can go for a maximum of 25 days. So they bring all the gear. They pre-pack all of your food. And so all you have to do is bring your own personal gear, any like drinks that you want for a month. And you show up just like ready to blow up the boats and like put everything together and load everything into the rafts. And honestly, Beau, it's like glorified car camping. Like you bring costumes, you bring like your biggest, baddest tent, you bring musical instruments and games. Like you can bring so much stuff. And so these boats end up being probably like 2,000 to 3,000 pounds each. And you have 3 or 4 passengers per boat. It's nuts. Like imagine an 18-foot raft just packed to the gills with stuff. And yeah, I freaking love it because I love getting to actually row those boats, and the water is big and burly, but like, honestly, you want your boat to be fairly heavy because those waves are like so likely to flip you over. Whereas if you have a heavier boat, you can sit a little bit lower in the water and have less of a risk of flipping depending on the rapid. So yeah, you're just super comfortable. You can bring whatever you want. You really get tight with a group of 15 or 16 people, depending on how many are on your trip. And you will leave that month-long adventure with like 15 new best friends. It's awesome.
So these are all random people based on if they draw the permit?
So typically the way it works is one person will draw the permit. So whoever the trip leader is, in this instance, my buddy Travis Taylor pulled the permit, and then he got to invite 15 people. And so do you remember Micah when you were up here in Alaska?
Yeah, Mike and Ness.
So Mike and Ness, he invited basically half the people that came on the trip. So like Travis invited a bunch of people. I invited Micah. Micah invited his friends. And so it's like, ideally, it's kind of a group of people you already know, or somebody knows, or somebody vouched for them.
Yeah.
And then you just end up getting to know those folks over the course of, the whole month. And gosh, every single trip I've gone on, it can be a little intimidating because you're like, how am I going to get along with this person on, a 25-day trip sharing everything? But man, every single trip I've come away with new friends and people that like I would do trips with every year if I could. So it's a very good opportunity to learn a lot about yourself and how you play well with others or not.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of teamwork to get everybody safely down the river.
It kind of sounds almost like when you go on, an extended hunt or anything with a group of people, like I'm sure like the same thing. You kind of see everyone's true character and how they react under stress or being tired or just being annoyed. I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's where, so this trip for me, being that it was my 5th time, like it's almost like you kind of have a routine and like you just sort of settle into this routine of getting up in the morning. Someone makes coffee. You're usually waking up before sunrise because you need to like get camp all packed up and get the boats loaded and get on the river. And you'll spend 6 to 8 hours a day actually rafting. So it's a ton of boating time because you cover about 220 some odd miles. And then at the end of the day, you find a great campsite, you unload the boats, you get camp set up. We're building bonfires with all the driftwood that we collect along the way. And you just settle into this like incredible routine where every single day you're outside, you're waking up with the sunrise, you're staying up late with your friends, looking at the stars and sitting around the campfire and playing music and eating a bunch of food. And oh God, there's like nothing else on earth I would rather do. Like if that river just went forever, I would be like, yes, this is my life. This is all that I'm doing. It's just rafting.
That is so cool. I'm sure that was a good break away from the business and everything as well.
Yeah, it was crazy because I had done buyer meetings for Sportsman's Warehouse and REI in December. And I had let them know like, hey, I actually need, an update on our initial POs by January 15th. I didn't tell them why I needed it by then, but ultimately I needed it by then so that I could go on this rafting trip. And so then January 15th came and went, and like I hadn't heard from the buyers, and I'm like, oh shit, like am I actually going to get to go on this trip, or do I need to like stay and keep hammering the keyboard to make sure like these deals actually go through? And thankfully my mentor Dan and Brad, my boyfriend, were like, you have to go on this trip. Like pack your bags, get on the airplane, like we'll take care of it. And so Brad and I were able to text message back and forth with the InReach. And it was about halfway through that river trip that I got an InReach message from Brad saying like, we got the Sportsman's Warehouse PO. So I like run up the beach to all my friends and I'm like, we did it. We got the purchase orders. And like everybody just hollered and celebrated. And it was very, very dynamic. But man, taking a month off of a business is a little risky.
Yeah. And you've been running crazy. I mean, since you've started, but I know in the last couple of years it's been a lot.
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot, but man, it's starting to kind of gain some momentum. I think we're about to turn, Heather's Choice is going to be 6 years old in August, and man, so much has changed in 6 years for the better. And so think I'm finally getting to the point of building this really amazing team of people that understands that I need to be able to like step away and go do some of these backcountry trips. And it's really, really nice. There's a lot to be said for building a good team of people.
Yeah, it's so cool to watch that, since the beginning. And so Heather, you and I have talked about it before, but I first heard about you and Heather's Choice and back, I don't remember what year it was, but it had to have been right at the beginning because you were on like one of the first episodes of Adam Yonkey's Beyond the Kill, and you were talking about your Kickstarter. I believe that's where I found it at. And I went and I was like reading about it. I'm like, healthy food options. And at that point I was just learning about backcountry hunting. And then I ended up, putting money to fund it and, and then started buying some things even before I started, I just started using it in Pennsylvania before I started doing any backcountry trips and then, watching that evolve and then getting to, become friends with you and Brad and the rest of the team and getting to come to Alaska. It's just been a really cool experience to see from, the outside of it.
Yeah, it is really, really cool. It's very, very humbling. And shit, I remember when you called me and you're like, so I've got this idea for East Meets West and like, I don't know. And I'm like, what? Of course. Like, what are you doing? Like, you have to do this. And look at you now.
I know. Yeah. I can actually remember where I was at that phone calls and like 4 houses ago where I lived, and I was standing in my living room pacing back and forth, and you're just like, no, like, basically quit being a little bitch and do it. Like I don't know if you said it in that words, but that's the way I took it. And I needed that push,
It's so freaking cool. And I feel like, before you and I hit record, we were talking about this a little bit of just like, we don't know what all is going to come. Like, we don't know what all is going to become of your business or mine, but we can see like 20 feet in front of us and be like, oh yeah, okay. Like, I think this is the next step. And like, then maybe the next step becomes clear and the next step and the next step. And I feel like for Heather's Choice, a lot of people from the outside could criticize the journey and be like, gosh, it's taken a really long time for it to grow to what it is. I'm surprised it's not bigger, or, they've like screwed up a bunch or lost, like, there's been so much that has transpired, but honestly, I feel like it couldn't have gone any faster because like I wasn't ready. There was so many things that I needed to learn. Like, as an example, like the bookkeeping and accounting and finance side of the business. Like, when I came in and started Heather's Choice, I didn't have any concept of what a margin was or pricing or distribution, like none of it. Like, didn't understand any of that stuff. So it took quite a few years for me to like learn that stuff and fully grasp it, to now be ready to go into these buyer meetings and to negotiate margins and to negotiate distribution. But had you put me in that situation any sooner, like, I would have fallen flat on my face because I wouldn't have known what I was talking about.
Yep.
So all this stuff happens in divine timing. And I feel like business is such an opportunity, much like Grand Canyon rafting trips or backcountry hunts. Like, it's such an opportunity to kind of learn what you're made of and what you can handle and how you react to stress and to uncertainty and taking risk and being uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, that's so, it's so cool to watch, like I said. And, from me knowing you, I've got to hear your journey when we, every once in a while, talk on the phone and kind of give updates, but like also seeing it through, the Heather's Choice Instagram page and seeing, when you and Brad are in there, putting labels on the packages and going through and doing all this crazy stuff, and like just seeing that and then seeing it grow as you have employees now and, just or more employees and just keep growing with it. It's so cool to watch that from me. I enjoy it, one, from seeing it, from knowing you guys, but also from the standpoint of like being, a small business owner myself and kind of trying to learn this process. Cause like you said, I knew absolutely nothing, about anything. And I still really don't, but I just like continually try to learn, and just like when things come in front of me, I'm just like, okay, well, this is another kind of hill here. I got to figure out how to navigate and watch a lot of YouTube videos and talk to people and try to figure out my way through it. And it's inspiring to see, I think in 6 years, Heather's Choice has come a long ways. That's for sure.
Thanks. Well, it's crazy because I met Brad like 3 days after starting the business. So he's been with me through the entirety of this journey. And it's so funny how like there'll be an evening where we're just like lounging on the couch, watching a movie, being super lazy. And I'll sometimes be like, like we should be doing something else. And I'm like, a lot has transpired in the last 6 years of like us being together and growing this business. Like there has really not been a dull moment. Like you and I both just like got houses for the first time and like are still running our businesses and like in relationships, like there's still so much going on. And as I described it to you earlier, like my life experience feels very, very rich. There's a lot going on all the time.
Wow. He's been with you from the very beginning through all those trials and tribulations. That's awesome.
Yep. Oh my gosh. And I don't think I ever told you that. So Brad and I had been dating for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And I was like, hey, so I'm going to go on a Grand Canyon trip. It's 30 days of us sharing a tent and we're going to be on a raft together. And my best friend, ex-boyfriend, and my stepdad are going to be there. Do you want to come? And Brad came with me on that trip and he just like, he totally like he was so great. Like if you can spend 30 days in a tent with somebody and you're 30 days dirty and like you still want to snuggle up with them, like they're probably a keeper.
Yeah. That's so funny. The fact that he agreed to it, that early on, that says something about him too.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, he got sucked in pretty quick.
That's awesome. No, but so explain a little bit about, your reasoning for starting Heather's Choice and what it is. I mean, like I said, you've been on the podcast before, and anybody that's listened to any of the episodes, I bet on 70% of them that it's mentioned at some point. So I'm sure it's not news to anybody what Heather's Choice is, but I'd like to get a little background on it.
Yeah, totally. So I grew up in Alaska, went to school in Bellingham, was a collegiate rower for 4 years, had a really successful rowing career, learned a ton about sports nutrition, had a pretty atrocious relationship with food through that whole journey. So I ended up going on to study at the Institute for the Psychology of Eating and just learning a lot about our relationship with food and what that all entails. And out of that, as I was learning about eating psychology, I also found myself really steeped in the CrossFit community back in Colorado. And so there I was doing CrossFit, learning more about nutrition, furthering my knowledge. I also began coaching athletes on their nutrition and really helping people to understand how a whole foods nutrition program was really going to kind of make or break their recovery and performance. So I had a ton of success with my first business called Open Nutrition. And finally in 2014, I was just like, I'm living in an air-conditioned apartment, like driving an air-conditioned car to an air-conditioned gym. Like, I want to go home. I'm super over this right now. And so in 2014, I moved home to Alaska and really got back into pack rafting, which is something I had done years prior. And as I was doing more pack rafting trips, which is where, imagine you're going backpacking, but you're also carrying a personal sized raft and a life jacket and a helmet and a dry suit and all the shit. Like, it's basically like hunting. Like, there's the amount of stuff you have to bring is kind of ridiculous. And so here I am, like, little miss, I eat healthy all the time and I'm a badass athlete. And I would go to try to pack for these trips. And I'm like, this food sucks. Like, I won't eat any of this because I followed such a stringent paleo diet. Like, I didn't eat legumes. I didn't eat refined sugars. I didn't eat dairy, wheat. All of it was out. And so realizing that anything that was already prepackaged and available didn't meet my nutritional standards, I ended up dehydrating my own food and fell in love with the stuff I was making. So like, I distinctly remember making the very first batch of smoked sockeye salmon chowder and being like, I'm a freaking genius. This is so freaking good. And I love this meal. And like, this is what I want to eat when I'm out pack rafting or backpacking or whatever. And so that summer of 2014, as I'm like ferociously dehydrating stuff and giving out samples to friends and super excited about it, a buddy of mine who I had met on my first Grand Canyon trip, his name's Jason, he basically sat me down and was like, what's it going to take for you to turn this into a business? And I'm like, well, I need like a bigger dehydrator and like I need some money to like get this thing off the ground. And so he drove me to Cabela's and bought me the biggest dehydrator that they had. He let me live in his fourplex for free. So I had a free place to live. He bought me the dehydrator, helped me get an EIN number and a business license, and said, like, I triple dog dare you to do this. So that was 6 years ago. And it's been an incredible journey. And so to this day, like, Heather's Choice still stands for putting healthy, delicious, good quality food in people's packs. We have the smallest packaging of any product on the market because I had originally started the business with like pack rafting in mind and knowing that pack space was super valuable. And thankfully, I think the quality of our products has like only improved over time. So it's just been really cool to see, like, even today we were having a meeting about the packaging design and talking about like making the zipper burlier for when somebody's out there and their hands are really cold and they're trying to zip the bag shut with gloves on. Like, it's still really baked into Heather's Choice that our products are made for the person who is out in the backcountry having a really epic experience that needs to be eating good quality food so they can get up and do it again the next day.
Yeah. And so let me give a little background with Heather's Choice. When I first started using it, my reasoning for it was I wanted something that was, I ate, at the time, relatively clean, what I thought, and wanted to continue to do that. And I'm like, oh, this is great. High in proteins, got, it's not just filled with salt and all these other things. And I was like, this is something I want to get into. And at the time too, I had found out probably a year before that I had Lyme's disease, and that created a bunch of different food allergies. And so the way that, your meals were prepared and everything made a huge difference for that alone. But what I didn't understand was the benefits I was going to get from a recovery standpoint. So, when you're going all day and you could be hiking, somewhere in the mountains from anywhere from 7 to 12 miles or whatever it might be, underweight, and, not used to doing that day after day after day, no matter how much you train, you're not used to doing that day after day. And, I was waking up feeling good and, by planning out my food and everything. And that was like, sold me going forward, is like, I need to make sure that I am planning my nutrition out and my food the same way that I am my gear, and going through it with a fine tooth comb and make sure I'm putting, quality stuff in my body. And yeah, it's actually been cool to see, like, you've even, I think you did some articles or blogs or something about it with how to dehydrate your own stuff. And it's cool to see that information out there now, and, a product that someone can go buy now at some of the sportsman warehouses and REIs, which is awesome to be able to, get that. So.
Yeah, it's definitely wild. I think that when I started the business, there wasn't like real big aspirations of like, I was just like pretty excited to share good food with people. And even still, like, if you come over to my house, like, I'm gonna make you food, and like that's my love language is cooking for people. Not because like I'm a master chef or whatever, but like that's just like that's my thing, is like food. And so it's really pretty cool that I now get to do that on a like national level.
Yeah.
So crazy. But yeah, it will be the day that like you can find Heather's Choice products at every REI, every Shields, every Sportsman's Warehouse, every like kick-ass independent gear shop in the country, every natural food store. Like, that's going to be a pretty monumental day. And I really see that being a possibility for us, that, you know, Packaroons can be at the natural food store, and Heather's Choice meals and snacks can be at every REI, and we'll just be freaking cranking out a bunch of good food. It's going to be a wild ride for many years to come.
Yeah, I love my favorite thing is when I have, you know, I'll always have a bunch of Packaroons in my pack, or if I'm at a trade show or whatever it is, and handing them out, and everyone's like, "What are you eating? You know, what are those things?" And having people try them for the first time, they're awesome little, as I call them, coconut cookies. I'm not sure if that's the right way of saying it, but they're absolutely great. And the same thing with the breakfast and the dinners. Even though like you've come out with some new flavors and stuff, the smoked sockeye salmon, that's still my favorite. And then the chicken mole is probably a close second.
Yeah. Yep. The salmon chowder goes with me on every trip. That's always my favorite meal. And gosh, like that's the thing. I want to release more meals and more product lines and like keep expanding and growing. And there's already so much like to manage. That's why I'm so highly motivated to like grow the business and to make more money and to be able to hire more people and to be able to have things move a little bit quicker. Cause I think that we need more variety in our dinner menu, and we need trail mixes and hot drinks and jerkies. And like, there's so much more that we can do with this business. And it's just money, just time, you know?
Yeah. None of those are big
there.
deals. You're good.
No. Nope. No, not at all. So yes, I'm so thrilled to have people like you who have been with us for a long time as a business and have stood by us through like all kinds of bullshit. And also, like, what I think is really cool is thinking about someone like you and like our buddy Micah and our buddy Steve Opat. There's a lot of people that I've gained as friends over the last 6 years that I know will be they'll be my friends no matter what happens with Heather's Choice. Like, sure, we met through the business, but like, we're going to be lifelong friends. And I don't really take that lightly. Yes. You're going to come to Alaska every summer, remember?
Yes. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it is so cool to, like I said, the journey, like just like how we met and, you know, the business and stuff. I love the message, the people behind it are even better. Like, it's just it's a really cool, it's a really cool thing to be a part of, and I'm really happy that I've got to kind of be a part of it from the beginning. So that's awesome. And so what I want to dive into within, you know, Heather's Choice and kind of your reason behind it comes down to, you know, when we've talked before, you and I say offline on things, and when you've talked in other podcasts or writing or whatever it might be, you talk a lot about the emotional connection to food. And I want to dive into that a little bit and hear what you mean by that statement, you know, or not really a statement, but that idea of that emotional connection to food.
Yep. This is one of my favorite topics. So when all of us are born, we pop out of the womb and we cry, right? And one of the first responses is like, oh, baby's crying, like, give it food. Like, and so that is so like built into our DNA. Like, I cry, I get food, or like I'm emotional, I get food. And that's not good or bad. That's just like, we just have to recognize that's kind of baked into our DNA from like the moment we are born. And then simultaneously, what people I don't think realize that I wish I could like stand on a rock and yell to everybody, we all have a relationship with food. And it is arguably the longest standing relationship we have in our entire life. And it goes all the way back to that first moment where you cry and you're given milk, and like it just goes on and on and on, right? So the other factor in that is that without food, we will die, right? Like food is an absolute necessity, which is where I have a really hard time when people say I'm a food addict. And it's like, that's like saying you're like an air addict. Like you have to have air to survive. You have to have water to survive. Like you have to have love. You have to have food. Like these are things we absolutely have to have. And so it gets really sticky when people start to use the language around like food addiction and things like that. So with all of that said, I don't think that most people recognize that they have a relationship with food at all, right? Like we just think like, oh, I eat and like that's it. But because food is something that we absolutely have to have for our survival, it's actually baked into us as well that the act of eating is meant to be pleasurable, right? So similarly, like the act of having sex is pleasurable because we want to be highly motivated to have sex so that we can procreate and like continue to build the species. And so this is where people try to take all of the pleasure out of eating, and they try to make it a very transactional thing. Like I did this workout, I get this amount of food. I was awake this many hours, I get this amount of food. And they really just kind of strip all the pleasure out of that relationship. And so you can imagine if you stripped all the pleasure out of having sex or like connecting with somebody, like you wouldn't be real excited about it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be very motivating. You're like, why am I doing this? This sucks. And so for people who are struggling in their relationship with food or in this emotional connection, there's a handful of things that can happen. And this is something that I spent years coaching people on. And obviously, if you could see the amount of hand waving I'm doing, like I really, really care about this topic. But I think that, again, it gets really sticky when we start to use the language around like, I'm addicted to food, I'm an emotional eater, and we sort of shame ourselves in that way. When in all reality, from my perspective and from my training, we all have a relationship with food. Our relationship with food is meant to be highly pleasurable. Like we're supposed to enjoy the act of eating, and that will not only impact our metabolism and our digestion, it will impact our appetite regulation. And so it can sometimes be sort of astounding for people that one of your top tier priorities in any nutritional program, in my opinion, should actually be like squeezing the pleasure out of every single meal and every bite of food that you have. And the reason for that is because then you kind of hit this pressure relief valve. Like, man, that meal was so good. I loved that. I feel so satiated. Like, I ate the perfect amount of food. I feel good. That was delicious. I'm satisfied. I've eaten and I'm done. Whereas if you have people that are just like trying to strip all the pleasure out of food, trying to make it super transactional, trying to not have an emotional connection with it, all of a sudden, like you can sit down and eat whatever it is, like chicken and broccoli and rice or a pint of ice cream or whatever. But if you actually didn't get any pleasure out of eating that food, your brain is like, excuse me, hey, like I actually didn't get anything out of that. You need to eat more. So like I actually get what I came here for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And even like, I guess I can relate when and I'm not sure if this is kind of going along your point, but if like, say I can think of yesterday, I was rushing around. I had a bunch of stuff to do. I made dinner real fast and kind of rushed and ate it, and I don't even remember eating it. And it was like not a, and it was a good meal that I had cooked. I cooked a steak on the grill and everything, and I should have been, I guess more satiated by it, and I wasn't, because I was just like always thinking of everything else and not, actually enjoying it at that point too. And I'm not sure if that's in correlation to what you're saying, but it makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, you're hitting it nail on the head there, because that is one of the fastest and easiest ways for people to start to play with their relationship with food, is to actually get some awareness around how fast they eat. Because if I sit down and I eat, let's say like 500 calories worth of food, and I eat it really quickly, well, my brain actually didn't get to participate in that. Like, I wasn't paying attention. And your brain is about 30% of the whole digestive process. It's like the cephalic phase digestive response, blah, blah, blah. And so you're like impacting your body's ability to digest and absorb that food because you weren't paying attention. Your brain wasn't involved. Your hormone response is all screwed up. And then you might find yourself going and reaching for more food and overeating because you weren't actually paying attention when you were eating at the first time. So if there's like a quick and easy way that I could offer for people to start to play with this, it's to actually focus on like plating your food, sitting down to eat, observing it, smelling it, tasting it, like really getting all of your senses involved in the act of eating. And that can change people's appetite regulation overnight. Like, it has an immediate impact on our ability to improve our digestion, have a better relationship with food, improve our metabolism. Like, it's freaking profound.
Yeah. And that's such an amazing thing that, by doing that, by being cognizant of it, like that you can, change your relationship with it, that, impacts your gut health. And if I'm not sure if that's the right term, but, just the way you feel after it.
Totally. Well, and you can play with that too. Like, you could take that same meal you made last night and eat the same thing for a week straight. Like, make that just like standard dinner, and have a night where you just eat it as fast as you can and see like how your digestion is. Like, does your body feel like bloated and distended, or like, do you feel fine? You can eat while you're watching TV and you're distracted and see how it impacts your digestion. You can like savor, eat slowly, get super into it, enjoy every bite, take 20 minutes to eat that same meal and see how your digestion is. And so the type of food and the amount of food could have stayed consistent, but your experience of it can dramatically change. And I feel like, Beau, you as somebody who's really, really intentional with something like shooting your bow, like you get this, right? Like,
Yeah.
You understand if you go rush through target practice, like, wow, I suck at this.
Yeah.
Versus taking your time and being super intentional and like controlling your breathing and controlling your stress response. And I know that you've talked about this in the past, and our bodies really, really, really need to be in that relaxed state in order to fully digest and process our food. Otherwise, we're just in the stress response and our body's like shuttling blood to our arms and legs because we're fleeing like onto the next chore or whatever it is. And like that impacts your digestive power. And again, this is me like really high on my soapbox.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so important.
Well, yeah, and I know, again, with my personal journey of it, is when I, as I've gotten busier with work and the podcast and preparing for hunts and all this stuff. Anyways, I just feel like I'd put a lot of pressure on myself to get, a bunch of things squeezed into a short amount of time. And I felt like, I was eating good food, if you want to put it that way, but I was still feeling like shit at times. Or Another thing I've noticed is when I would eat and I'd rush, I would eat more because I wasn't letting my interpretation of it is I wasn't letting, my brain wasn't, catching up to it, not telling me that I was full. And then I'd overeat and then feel again, terrible after it, even though it might have been, quality food that I was eating, but just that the end result was not positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, when I had the opportunity to work with people one-on-one in coaching, even just having them fill out like a 3 or 4 day food journal. And as they start to recognize like, oh, I ate my breakfast really fast. I skipped lunch because I was too busy. I rushed through dinner. Like that's not a food problem. Like this is a systemic problem. You are rushing through your life. Like what all are you missing? Like what do you why are you rushing? And I'm not judging anybody because like this girl is like in the thick of that right now. I am like swimming in a pile of paperwork, like with, plates left over from breakfast that I haven't gotten to and like half empty glasses. Like I get it. And for me, like now getting to see that like that disorganization or that little bit of chaos is a real surefire opportunity for me to step back and say, ooh, okay, like time to like take a break, put the dishes away, sit, get centered, get intentional, and immediately like you can just take yourself out of that parasympathetic like or that stress response and get yourself into like a relaxed, calm state. And the trickle down effect of that will impact every area of your life, is being able to regulate your stress response. So yeah, it is rich. And anytime anybody ever wants to talk about eating psychology, like I love this stuff. And I think that even if people didn't change their diets at all, this could be a game changer for folks.
And one thing that I called you about a few years ago, and I ended up writing a couple articles on it, and I got a mixed response from people on it, kind of thinking that my theory on this was kind of bullshit, but it was that the term target panic when it comes to shooting your bow or anything, basically meaning that you're getting, an elevated heart rate, you're kind of almost in a form of adrenaline and you're not able to focus and you shoot poorly. You're not able to focus. And I was saying a lot of that was correlated to my diet. And, and I called you about it and was kind of discussing some of the things I was experiencing. I'd get kind of shaky and I was feeling just like I was just struggling with shooting at times. And, it came down to, for me personally, I had taken in too much caffeine, especially before that, or some other foods that were playing with my, my blood sugar, and just things like that were just really had an impact on it. And, and that's something I never thought of before. Years ago I would take, whatever food into the tree stand with me, and, whether that ended up having an impact or not, I don't know. But like knowing my body now and testing things out, like it definitely affects my mental state and the way that, whether I get almost panicked about things. And I know it just in my regular life. If I'm rushing around, I'm traveling, if I stop and get gas station food, or I'm eating poorly, my stress levels are higher. I just feel anxious. And maybe my body reacts more emotionally than others, but that's, what I've experienced. I don't think I'm kind of alone there.
No. And that's the gift too, is if we can start to befriend our bodies and start to listen and like get curious of what is my body trying to tell me right now. It's such a powerful way for us to get a handle on our stress and our health. And I also think that it's important for you to allow yourself to have those experiences again. Because like, as an example, on Sunday, Brad and I had been out hiking all day, and like end of the day, like we made some coffees on the tailgate and then we're like, yeah, like we're going to stop and like get ice cream, like just super nonchalant. Like we don't go out for ice cream all the time, but it feels novel. And like within 2 hours of that, like he was exhausted and tired and like sleepy. I had the shakes like so freaking bad. And I was like, oh, this is what a blood sugar crash feels like.
Yeah.
Like I'd almost forgotten because like I try really hard to not just eat a shitload of sugar all in one sitting. But it's important for us to like experience those things for ourselves. Like, what does it feel like when my blood sugar crashes? Or what does it feel like when I'm fat adapted and I can go for a handful of hours without eating? Or what does it mean if I have like regular, consistent, balanced meals? Like, there's so much opportunity for us to have curiosity in our relationship with food, and it makes us better at our jobs. It makes us better in the backcountry, in the gym. It makes us like nicer to be around, because if you're hangry and you're snapping at your partner, like then you're a jerk.
Yeah.
You just need to eat something. So I think that our relationship with food impacts every single area of our life. And I think it is also a mirror for us of how we relate to other aspects of our lives. And people can deny that all day long. But man, oh man, I really, really, really think, especially as backcountry athletes, putting ourselves into dangerous situations, like areas where we need to be self-sufficient, the weather's incremental, there's big scary animals out there. Like we need to be on, like we need to be focused, we need to be alert, we need to be healthy. Like I think that food does play a very large part in our backcountry experience. Hence why I have a food business.
You said something there that made me laugh when you said about being hangry. I was having a conversation with my girlfriend a few weeks ago, and I came home from work and I was extremely hungry. And she's like, she goes, I look at you, it's like you're not even I'm looking right through you. Like you're just so out of it. Like you're not even like cognizant of what you're doing or where you're at. Like I not that I get angry. I just get like I just can't think. I just don't want to talk. I'm just in a bad place. Like my relationship with food is like a very important part of my life, I'd say.
Yeah, totally.
Which it is for everybody. I guess it's just whether you're recognizing that or not. And even when so one thing that I've trained myself to do and realize, like for me personally, I used to get up and I get up and work out before I go to work. So I'm getting up early, and I used to eat breakfast before I did that. And then I'd realize I was super hungry, early on, right after that. So now I've taught myself to, I get up and I go work out, and then I'll eat something afterwards. And that's helped me out for when I go on backcountry hunts, because when I wake up, like I'm not in the mood just to, pile down some food. So I'll get up and I'll, hike to say Glassing Point or whatever it is. And then, maybe a few hours into the morning, then I'll fire up the jet oil and get some buckwheat breakfast out and, and cook up some food. But that's helped me a lot of just being able to, I don't know, like for me personally, that's been something that's helped me out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, that's a whole nother topic we can cover too, is just talking about fat adaptation and what that even means and why it's important and what the difference is between men and women. Because I think it's important for all of us to have that ability to like wake up and go a few hours without eating and not get super low blood sugar. Mm-hmm. But what I'm seeing on the extreme end of that is everybody like really pushing hard on this keto train. And especially for women of childbearing age who are like very physically active, I'm like, no, like don't do it. So like there can be extremes in that. And I just want to like preface that like, you don't have to be paleo. You don't have to be keto. You don't have to be plant-based in order to start to get curious about how your body responds to food, how you regulate your blood sugar, how you regulate being hangry, how you experience food and what your relationship is with it. Like, it is so multifaceted. But I'm very, 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 very proud of you for having awareness about how your body responds to food, because that's the only thing that really matters.
Now, don't get me wrong here, Heather. Although I'm aware of it, I don't always make the best decisions with it.
Oh, neither do I. I think I told you last night, like, we like made tacos and like stayed up till 2 a.m. drinking margaritas with our friends. Like, not a great nutritional choice. But when I feel like shit the next day, like, I don't have to wonder why.
Yeah. That's so funny. And so, all right. So if you were going on, say, or really with everyday life, but, specifically for this, talking about, let's say, going on a backcountry trip, what would you recommend as far as like a balance of things, or what would you recommend putting in kind of your diet there?
So I think for people who are going on backcountry trips, your nutrition plan starts way before you ever go on the trip, right? Like, as you already said, you basically practice your nutritional strategy in the off season, and then that carries into your backcountry trips. If you're somebody who's even just going out for like an overnighter or something short, I think that focusing on getting enough protein is a big one, because most of us don't even do that in our day-to-day lives. So I'm a huge advocate for finding good sources of protein at every meal and snack. So backcountry trips, that might be, it might be some protein powders, it might be jerkies, it might be nuts and seeds, which are like mediocre at best for providing protein, but it's something. We always bring like salamis and raw cheeses, dehydrated meals that have a good amount of protein in them. But protein is the thing that's really going to contribute to you recovering well. It's one of the pieces that will allow you to recover well from the strenuous activity. And it will also help regulate your appetite. So that's kind of like priority number one for me, is making sure that I have enough good quality protein. And then from there, I'd start looking at like the good quality fats that you're going to have. So this is where nuts and seeds, coconut oil, coconut products, like butters and ghees and things like that. Like, you can do a lot, like just getting some good quality fats into your diet. And then last but not least, like, get some freaking fiber, right? Like, you're going to get fiber from fruits and from vegetables and grains and beans and things like that. So this is again where if you have a healthy diet at home that includes all 3 macronutrients and is nutritionally balanced, when you're going out into the backcountry, you can either ratchet up the amount of fats that you're taking, or you can ratchet up the amount of carbs. Maybe you do both. You get some more like salt, maybe some more sugar because you're more insulin sensitive. But the nutritional strategy for the backcountry, I think, is simply like 20 to 50% more calories than what you typically are eating at home, and the same macronutrient balance, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what I can't stress enough, being someone that learned this, after the first year of that, really practicing, I guess I shouldn't say practicing, but the way of preparing for your hunt and, eating similarly, all through your life. Because if you go there, and I don't care if it's, Heather's Choice products or it's anybody else's, and you just start putting all that stuff into your body on the trip, your body is not going to react great. Your stomach's not going to like it. You need to be ready for all that protein and the fats and stuff, and or otherwise, like I said, you're going to have some experiences that are unpleasurable.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's again where, like, if you struggle with digestion, free, easy advice: start paying attention to how quickly you eat your meals. Like, that will get you tons of bang for your buck. Doesn't cost you anything. Next up, I think that people starting to get an awareness around the foods that they are sensitive to. So, like, I'm not sure what your laundry list is, but I know for myself, like if I have too much dairy, like that will screw with me. If I have too many carbohydrates, too much sugar, like that stuff doesn't sit well with me. So that's another piece that people can focus on. And then like you already said, like if people don't have an awareness of like their macronutrient balance, they might go out there and eat a whole bunch of fats and be like, ugh, why? That feels awful on my digestion, potentially because they're not producing enough bile or they don't have enough stomach acid. There's so many moving parts, and I'm going to wholeheartedly agree with you that people need to practice this stuff just like they would anything else, so that they have an awareness of how their body is going to respond to this uptick in calories that they're suddenly going to be taking in.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like you're talking about with the oils and stuff and the fats, like, so when I go on trips to up my calories, you know, I'm adding coconut oil to my coffee, or sometimes I don't like I don't add to my coffee just because I don't like getting my cup, you know, kind of oily like that, but I'll put it right into my buckwheat breakfast. And then I'll put olive oil in my dinners additional just to up those calories and those fats. But if you don't kind of prepare for that up going forward, like I said, that's a pretty, you know, high increase in fats. Like when I look at my food plan that I have laid out in a spreadsheet, and I'm pretty sure I've actually written an article for you, Heather, on the Heather's Choice blog of, you know, what I've taken on trips. But like, I have a pretty high protein and fat and a mix of carbs in there too. But like if you don't kind of live that lifestyle a little bit, like I said, you're gonna struggle with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I would like to do a better job of talking about this stuff even more. Cause again, like I know that there are people who are getting great results on a ketogenic diet at home. And there's even people who are doing great on it in the backcountry. Those people are typically like 25 to 50-year-old men. You're not going to see as many women who are like really truly excelling on a super duper less than 30 grams of carbohydrates nutrition plan, like period. And so I just want to be careful too, to not generalize and lead people into thinking like, oh, just eat a bunch of proteins and fats and you'll be fine. It's like, yeah. That's not the whole picture. That's only part of it.
Yeah. That's funny. Yeah, but other than that, so give a few of your favorites that you like to take in the backcountry, some of your Heather's Choice products, as well as other things that you like to take to meet your nutritional needs.
Yeah, totally. So on this Grand Canyon trip, as an example, which is, you know, a 20 some odd day backcountry trip, we're able to bring all kinds of different foods. So you can eat whatever, but I supplemented my nutrition plan with a bunch of some of my favorite stuff. So I eat a lot of like sprouted grain breads, and that's a whole nother topic, but sprouted grains are much more digestible than unsprouted. So I'll bring like sprouted bread, and I will either preferably eat eggs and some sort of breakfast meat. That's typically how I start my day. So I'm getting fiber, carbohydrates, proteins, and fats all in one whack. If I can get like some leafy green vegetables in there, I'll do that too. If it's like more of a camping trip where we're actually packing in somewhere, the blueberry Heather's Choice buckwheat breakfast all day. Like either the blueberry one, or I'll bring the banana buckwheat breakfast and squeeze a packet of peanut butter in there. Ugh,
ooh,
it's so good. So freaking good.
Oh,
It's
that
like,
sounds great.
dude, it's like 730 calories. It's a lot of food. Like you are not going to go hungry with like the banana breakfast and a packet of peanut butter. So I'll do that, and then probably 2 cups of coffee because I am a coffee hound. For lunches, we've been bringing these like Mary's Gone crackers. They really hold up well, and you can get them at the grocery store, and they're once again like a gluten-free cracker, but we'll do those with sliced cheese, like a raw cheddar or something like that, and then salami. So it's almost like really gourmet Lunchables.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember eating Lunchables.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, so much plastic in the packaging with little food in there.
Totally. Yes. So like I would basically have this like super gourmet little snack platter when I was on my raft, because when I'm rafting, like typically you're rowing all day and not taking breaks to like actually have a lunch. So I needed something kind of quick and easy that I could eat while I was rowing. And then in that case, I'll have like whole apples or whole vegetables. If it's backcountry stuff, then potentially I'll have dried fruit or Lara bars or things like that. Cause again, like none of us eat enough fruits and vegetables. Yeah. And then dinner time, like I've already said it, but the Heather's Choice salmon chowder is by far my favorite meal. Like I will eat that all the time, and it's really, really filling. My second choice, it might actually be the mom's spaghetti, and the mom's spaghetti with like a little bit of Parmesan cheese shaved on top. Oh God, it's so freaking good. Ooh. And the mom's spaghetti, the reason I love it so much is because it's a meal that I will make at home all the time for Brad and I, which is like gluten-free noodles, some sort of ground lean meat, zucchini, mushrooms, marinara sauce. Like once again, it's just that really vegetable rich, high protein, moderate carbohydrate meal that like I could eat all the time. So it's pretty freaking simple. The other thing that I like to bring is lots of mixed nuts. Like those are just tons of good calories, and like you can eat those as a snack anytime. I brought packaroons obviously on my Grand Canyon trip. I'll bring like a handful of different supplements, like a magnesium supplement to take at night to help with sleep. What else did I have that was monumental? Not much. Like it's pretty freaking simple. Yeah. Is just always trying to make sure you have all 3 macronutrients, you're eating some fruits and vegetables, and the quality of fats that you're having is good. Cause that's a whole nother hour-long topic, is the quality of fats that people are eating and how much that can screw with your inflammation and gut health and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, it's all, like I said, it's so interesting to me. And I've went through and I've read so much on it and listened to podcasts and just listened to my own body on things and trying to learn from it. Food is just like a fascinating thing for me. And so you were just mentioning the mom's spaghetti meal that you have there. I'm pumped to try that again this year, because I feel like you took it out of your lineup for a while, right?
Yeah. So like without going too far, I was making everything in my little rinky-dink apartment. We were doing co-packing for a handful of years. It was an epic disaster. We got our own kitchen here in Alaska in end of 2017, early 2018. And so since we moved into our own dedicated kitchen, we've been able to release new meals or to take old favorites like the mom's spaghetti and now make it in our own dedicated kitchen. So that recipe got completely reformulated, but it's quickly becoming a bestseller of ours again.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to add that to my Alaskan trip this year, because that I remember that, before when you first had it and loving it. But like you said, it's gonna be tough to beat the Sockeye salmon chowder. That is just an absolutely amazing meal.
Yeah, well, make sure you give us a heads up before you roll through Anchorage, because we'll have some R&D stuff to send with you too. There's like 4 packaroon flavors you haven't tried that we're working on, and there's other dinners, and yeah, we'll hook you up for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Heather, I want to thank you for coming on here and talking. I mean, we could talk for hours, but I think that we got covered a good enough amount of stuff on this one here.
Yeah, totally. I'm always happy to come on and chat. If people have follow-up questions or want us to dive deeper into any topics, I'm more than happy to do it, because I find myself like pretty steeped in business talk all day, and it's very, very fun and refreshing to get to talk food for a little bit. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. So where can people find more information on Heather's Choice, on you, and where they can kind of follow along with the journey?
Yeah. So heatherschoice.com, you can find all of our products. You can find our retailers listed on our store locator as well. So as we mentioned earlier, we now have REI and Sportsman's Warehouse stores in the Western states, a pretty limited selection of those stores. So if you can't find us at your local REI or Sportsman's, don't worry, we're coming for you. We'll be there someday. We also have independent gear stores. We have about 200 independent retailers in the Western states, but we're always looking for more of them. So if you have a awesome independent gear store that you'd like us to reach out to, definitely send them our way. And then I run our Instagram and Facebook and email marketing. So if you want to like quickly reach out and say hi, just send me a direct message on Instagram. I'll probably be like sitting on the front porch with a glass of wine answering Instagram messages. So that's a pretty easy way to reach me.
Oh, perfect. Well, again, Heather, it's pretty cool to get you back on here as you were, along the ride from the beginning and, a big part of this. So I'm pumped to get to have you on here and looking forward to getting to see you in August.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Beau. Enjoy your new house and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. We'll see you, Heather.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.